So for today's project, we're going to work on a name animation. And then the main idea of this is going to be we're going to animate a word out. So I want you guys to pick a word, preferably around 5 to 6 letters, because that's the amount I'm doing. And then once you have this word, it can be your name, it can be any word you want, as long as hopefully it's not inappropriate or anything. But once you have this word out, I'm going to start talking about concepts and just come up with this word because that's what we're going to be animating today. So the first part I'm going to talk about is just going to be what we're going to need for the project. And for this project, the main new concept we're going to talk about is going to be sound. Because for sound, it's something that we haven't used as much. And I did mention in our first lesson that we have all of these different tabs. The third tab is going to be just the sound tab. And when you click on this, you have the sounds. So I hope all of you guys, by the way, open up to a new project. And the idea of sound, I'm just going to keep explaining, is that with every sprite we have some built-in sounds, and with every sound we have a couple of different options inside of this sound tab. So with our cat sprite, the automatic sprite that's put in, we're going to have a meowing sound because it's a cat. So if I were to play this, it's just going to play the cat sound. And obviously we have a bunch of different options here. So the main ones are just going to be making it go faster or slower. And then the main thing to notice about faster and slower is that when we get faster, it's actually going to get higher and it's going to be more high pitched. And then when we get slower, it's going to get more lower pitched. So the idea of this is I can go faster, slower, louder, softer, and then near the end there are a bunch of different cool settings, which if you want to play with on your own time, you can do that. So the other thing about sound is it is its own category of code. So it's going to be the third category, this magenta color. And there are a couple of different blocks we can go with for our sound. So earlier I did mention that the sound here in this tab is going to be in the sprite. So for the sprite, we have the meowing sound, but I can add more sprites. More sounds. Just like with my sprites or with my backdrops where I can choose a sprite or choose a backdrop, I can do the same thing with sound. So again, if I'm going too fast, make sure to type in the chat. But with sounds, I can choose from the library, I can record a sound, I can pick a random sound, or I can upload a sound. So with the sound library, Scratch has a really big sound library. And in order to import or take in a sound, all you have to do is you have to hover over the sound, and then if you want to play it, you can hover over the purple button. And then otherwise, you just click on the sound and it brings it in. So this is going to be near the bottom. I'm going to go over this later in the lesson, so don't worry too much about it. But we are going to use sounds. We are going to choose sounds and bring them in. So the way we can code with sounds is that we can play sounds. And there are a couple main things. The first block we're going to see is going to be play sound until done, which is pretty much just going to play the sound until it finishes. The other block is going to be start sound. So both of these manage to play the sound, and they're not that different until the sounds get longer. So what that means is like when I have a full blown out long orchestra, then this is going to play all the way until it's done. However, this one is just going to play, it's just going to start it and it's going to play. But for the short sounds we're using, like the meow, where it's just like a second or so, the idea of this is it's just going to play the sound and it's going to start it. So with our code, when I click on this block, it's just going to play the sound. So the same thing is going to happen for this one. And the idea of these is when I'm coding, it's just going to allow it to play the sound. So then the third block I have is going to be stop all sounds. And then the idea of this is it's just going to stop the sounds. So when I play my sounds and if it keeps playing, all this is going to do is it's going to stop the sounds, and that's pretty self-explanatory. So the other thing we're going to do is we're going to look at pitch effects. So how many of you guys have used or understand the idea of pitch? Okay, so some not. So the idea of pitch is basically where when you have music or when you have sound, you can make it higher or lower pitched. That's all we're gonna need for this lesson. So higher pitch is just going to be higher pitch, it's going to be lighter, it's going, not really lighter, but it's going to be higher, and then lower pitched is just going to be lower. So when I change my pitch effect, what I'm basically doing is I'm saying I want my sound to be lower. It's going to sound lower, or I want it to sound higher. And the way this is going to work is when I go negative, when I put in like -10, it's going to make the pitch lower. So if I were to play the sound meow, and then I change the pitch effect by -10, and then I play the sound meow again, it's going to be significantly lower because when I change by negative, it's going to be a lower pitch. Does that kind of make sense? And then again, if you have questions, don't raise your hand, type it in the chat. Okay, and then so the same thing is going to happen for higher pitched. So again, for pitches, it's just going to be how high or how low something is. So when I change my pitch effect by a higher number or a positive number, it's going to make the pitch higher. So if I were to click on this a couple times, and by a couple I mean quite a few times, when I play the sound again, it's going to be a really high pitched sound. So when I change the pitch effect by a positive number, it's going to be higher, and then when I change it by a negative number, it's going to be lower. And then the final thing we're going to have that we're pretty much going to use for this program is going to be clear sound effects. And then the idea of this is it's basically, so when we have pitch and we change it too high or too low, clearing is just going to bring it back to the original thing. So when I click clear sound effects, and then I click the meow again, it's just going to go back to the original meowing sound. So we have with our sounds, we can play it, we can stop it, we can change our pitch effects higher or lower, we can set our pitch effect back normal, and then we can clear our effects. So those are going to be the main ideas in sound we're using today. Does that make sense? Type it in the chat. Okay, good. Again, if you have questions, you can private message me. So the next thing we're going to look at is going to be backdrops, and these are going to be the two main ideas for this program. So backdrops are going to be the background, and I know we haven't used a lot of them so far, but that's going to be a main idea in today's program. So we can choose a backdrop, and then just like with sprites, we have our options. We can choose it, we can paint it, we can pick a surprise one, or we can upload a backdrop. But when I go to choose a backdrop, what it does is it basically goes to my huge amount of Scratch's library of backdrops. So for today's program, we are going to pick two backdrops in addition to the white one. So I want you guys to kind of look at the backdrops now, think about which ones you like. It doesn't really matter for the program as long as you like the backdrop. But the idea with backdrops is, let's say I'm going to pick the Arctic because it's the first one. So I can actually, I mentioned with our previous programs, we have programmed a lot of sprites. So like with Pong, we programmed 2 different balls and 2 different paddles, and it was a lot of sprites, and all the code went into individual sprites. So for the ball's movement, it would go in the ball. For the paddle's movement, it would go in the paddle. And the idea is pretty much the same, where when I code inside of a sprite, or I code inside of a backdrop. So the thing with Scratch is that I can actually code inside of the backdrop. So I think someone accidentally did code inside this once, but the main idea with the backdrop is when I click on this stage bar here, it should be on the right side of your screen. When I click on this, it lets me code, and all the blocks look pretty much exactly the same, except for you'll know you're coding inside of the backdrop when the motion says no motion blocks. So when there are no motion blocks, you can't move your stage because it's the background. You can't move the background. So when the stage is selected, there will be no motion blocks. You won't be able to code in motion. But you will have a lot of different other blocks. So we are going to use these blocks to code today. So when I grabbed my backdrop, what it does is just like with costumes. So with our sprite, the second tab is costumes. I have 2, 3 costumes. But with the backdrop, what it does is when I add a new backdrop, it creates a new costume for my backdrop. So in this case, it's going to be the Arctic. And the idea of this is I can switch my backdrops to different things throughout the program. So if I were to click on this, or actually if I were to select this, it's going to give me a couple options. So right now my 2 backdrops are going to be backdrop 1 and the Arctic. So it's going to let me switch the backdrop to either one of these. And then the other thing it's going to let me do is it's going to let me switch backdrop to next backdrop or previous backdrop or random. And what these are going to do is it's going to let me basically go to the next or the previous backdrop. So when I switch backdrop to next backdrop, when I switch my background from the Arctic to the next one, which in this case it would go back to the first one, when I click on this, it's just going to go back to my original white one. And then when I click again, it's going to go back to the Arctic. So this is going to allow me to basically switch backgrounds constantly throughout the program. And then the next thing we're going to talk about isn't just in backdrops, it's also going to be in sprites. So this is going to be called color, and color effects is basically like the color of your sprite. You can think about it that way. It's like putting a color over your sprite. And what this means is that when I change my color effect, what it does is it's going to change the color of my sprite slightly. So when I click on this, it's going to change my sprite, my orange cat, from orange to green. And then if I click on it again, it's going to change to darker green and then blue, and it's basically going to keep changing the color effects over and over again. And then there are 2 things I can do to reset this. The first one is going to be set color effect. And what set color effect is going to do is it's basically going to reset the color effect back to normal. So if I change my color effect, I set it back to 0, it's going to be fine. The other thing is going to be clear graphic effects, and it's pretty much going to do the same thing, where when I click on this, it's going to clear all of the effects I've done, and it's going to bring it back to normal. So do the looks make sense to you guys? Okay, great. So we are going to have a pretty long project today, so I might move a little fast if you guys feel. Okay, yeah, most of you should be able to do your name, if not, just a word you like. You can make it longer, so just come up with a word we're going to animate today, and then you can make a longer project name, like you could make it 7 letters, but you are going to do a little bit more animating. So what we're going to do is, for those of you who aren't sure yet, we're going to animate our word out. So we're just going to animate a name or a word, let it be able to move around, do cool things. So I hope all of you guys have Scratch open right now. What we're going to do is we are going to delete our cat sprite because it's a great cat, but we're not going to use it today. And we're going to actually go to create a new sprite. And then when we create a new sprite, we're going to go to the library and we're going to scroll all the way down. And there are 3 main different fonts, which we're going to be using. And we're just going to go in order. We're going to do the orangey font, and then the blue font, and then the green font. So for your first letter, I'm going to be animating out the word scratch. You can animate the same letter or you can animate something different. So for scratch, since the first letter is S, I'm going to grab a sprite that's just the letter S. So whatever word you have, if you have like the word cake and you want to grab C, or like whatever word you have, take the first letter from the alphabet, this orange alphabet, and then click on the letter in order to create the sprite. So when you have that, type it in the chat. Okay, so for this, you are going to need to be able to basically plan out your sprites. You could create all of your sprites right now. I'm not going to do that. But what we're going to do is make sure you have enough space for the rest of your letters. So even if you have a short word like scratch, you want to make sure that you put the first letter somewhere near the front or somewhere near the left side of the screen, just so for your other letters you do have enough space. So I'm going to have my S somewhere around the edge, and I'm going to set it as the first position. And when I do that, I'm going to say when green flag clicked. So just your standard when green flag clicked. I'm going to go to my location. And then for this letter, I'm going to say point in direction 90. So I'm going to say when green flag clicked, I'm going to go to my initial position somewhere near the edge of the screen, and I'm going to point in direction 90. And then again, I'm going to go slide by slide, so once you're done with the slide, type it in the chat. Yeah, so you basically create your first letter. So even if the sprite might be a different letter, but I want the code to be somewhat similar. So if you have more letters, then you might want to move it more to the edge. If you have less letters, then I guess you could move it towards the middle, but just have it go to a position somewhere on the edge and then point in direction 90. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is, if you guys are not done coding this part, code it, but I'm going to take a quick break just to talk about angles. So how many of you guys have learned about angles in a circle, the amount of angles when you do a full rotation? So how many degrees is it when you make a full rotation in a circle? Okay, great. So that's going to be 360 degrees. So a full rotation is 360 degrees. And you know, in Scratch where you have direction, it allows you to basically turn the dial. And the thing with Scratch is it doesn't say 360, it's actually going to say positive 1, it's going to say positive 0 to 180, and then from 180, it's going to turn to negative. So it's going to have negative 180, positive 180, added together, that's going to be 360 degrees. So what this means is if I want my sprite to move 360 degrees, however many angles, so if I have it turn 15, turn 15, turn 15 over and over again, in the end it needs to turn 360 degrees in order to make it back to where we originally were pointing. So let's say I want it to turn a certain amount of degrees. So if I'm going to have it turn, let's say I'm going to repeat 4 times. If I want it to repeat 4 times and then turn a full circle, and I'm going to say turn blank degrees, wait 1 second. And then, by the way, the waits in this project are just going to be, I'm going to wait 0.3 seconds, just because that's fast enough. So if I want it to repeat 4 times, and then I want it to keep turning, and I want to turn it in a full circle, so it's pointing 90 degrees right now, and then at the end it's going to point 90 degrees again, how many degrees do I need to turn inside of this one block? Okay, yeah. So the idea is a full circle is 360 degrees. So if I'm going to take my circle and I need to 4 times rotate a certain amount, I'm going to do 360 divided by 4, which is going to be 90 degrees. So the idea is I'm going to divide the total amount of degrees that I want to turn, and I'm going to divide it by 4 because I'm repeating 4 times. So I'm going to turn 90 degrees each time. So when I click the green flag, reset it to 90, and I click this, if I repeat 4 times going 90 degrees, it's going to turn 360 degrees total. So you can think about this as 90 plus 90 plus 90 plus 90, or 90 times 4. So if we play this, it's obviously not going to go very smoothly because I'm only pausing 4 times. So for this program, what we're going to do is we're going to repeat 10 times. If I repeat 10 times and I want to turn 360 degrees, how many do I turn each round? So again, remember 360 degrees. Yeah, so if I want to turn 360 degrees and then I want to repeat 10 times, you guys are doing great, it's going to be 36 degrees each. So this might be a little bit of review for some of you, but we're going to turn 36 degrees each time 10 times. And then with this, I'm just going to add this to this. So when I click the green flag, it's going to turn 10 times, 36 degrees each. So the rotation was a little bit slow, so what you can do if you find it slow or too fast is you can change the wait time. So if I change it to 0.1, it's going to look like it's going a lot faster. So type in the chat when you have this code done. Okay, and then so we did talk about broadcasting in a project, and for this project, we're going to use a lot of broadcasting. Just as a review, does anyone remember like a brief definition of what or how broadcasting works? And then again, if you need help, StarCoder Assistant and I are here. So the idea of broadcasting, great, yeah. So the idea of broadcasting is just going to be from one sprite or from one location, because I'm coding inside of this sprite, from me coding in this sprite to me coding in another sprite or even in this sprite. What it's basically going to do is it's going to say, I'm going to broadcast a message. I'm going to say, from this sprite, I'm going to do a global message, just like the best example I can give is like when you think about Wi-Fi signals, right? Where you have Wi-Fi signals transmitting everywhere, you're just giving a global idea or a global transmission of a broadcast. So when I broadcast a number or when I broadcast a message, I'm going to broadcast message 1, and I'm going to make a new message, and this is going to be second letter. So the idea of broadcasts in this is it's going to tell my next sprite. So right now my sprite is the S, the first letter. It's going to tell the next sprite to start. And I'm going to create this new broadcast called second letter. So I'm going to add a pause in between just so that we can give and see a visible pause in between the first and the second letter. So I'm going to wait 0.5 seconds. And it's going to broadcast second letter. So when I click on this, it's going to be exactly the same. It's going to turn, and then the second letter is going to be able to code with the broadcast. So does that make sense? And then type in the chat when you have this code. Okay, great. So yeah, I saw someone did say in the chat that they turned 100 times and 3.6. You can change this to however many times you want, as long as it's 360 degrees in the end. So for the second letter, what we're going to do is we are going to add another sprite. So we're going to do this a lot. We're going to add our second letter, and in this case, for me, it's going to be C. For you, it's whatever the second letter of your word is. And for this, we're going to go into the next font. It's going to be the glow or the blue font. It's going to be right underneath the orange one. And I'm just going to click and grab this sprite. So with the sprite, I hope you guys all have that in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually have it fly in. So I'm going to start it somewhere near the bottom. And for this part, I don't have the exact measurements. You can look at the slides or what I'm doing for the exact measurements. But the idea is I'm going to drag it to somewhere near the bottom. And when you drag, you do want to be careful not to drag it too far, otherwise it's not going to work. So drag it somewhere near the bottom. And I'm going to say, when green flag clicked, I'm going to hide. And I'm going to go to this location. So somewhere around the bottom, I'm going to go to this location and hide when the green flag is clicked. And then when we have that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this letter basically fly in. So I'm going to basically have it turn from here and then go all the way up to its location. And to do this, we are going to use our broadcast. So we're going to say, when I receive second letter, make sure that you're broadcasting second letter. I'm going to set my size. And this is going to be in the look section. We're going to say, set size, make sure it's not change size, it's set size to 50%. So when I set my size to 50%, and then I show, what this is going to do is it's going to allow me to set my size to 50% and then appear on screen. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to point in a direction. I'm going to point toward the top. I'm going to point in around 45, 30 degrees. So for this part, you are going to need to guess and check a little bit, but basically you're going to want to point it in a certain direction. So when you have this, type it in the chat. Okay, great. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have it move to the location. So I'm going to repeat 20 times. And this is just because I want to repeat it many times. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say wait 0.01 seconds because we want a very small wait. And I'm going to have it move 10 steps and change the size by 5. And what this is going to do is it's basically going to, every time I step, my size is going to change by 5. So make sure you're using change and not set. And when I run this code, it is going to do that. So make sure it's 5 and not 50. But the idea of this is it's going to move locations. So when I have it go to my location, and then I say when I receive second letter, it's just going to move to its location. So it's going to repeat 20 times, it's going to move 10 steps, which is 200 steps, and it's going to wait and change size a little bit every time. So the important thing to note about this is that you will get a little bit off. So if you're coding right now, I do want you to pause and watch this bit real quick. But you will get a little bit off. And then there are two ways to change this. If you feel like your letter is too near the center, what you can do is you can change your location. You can change it to somewhere lower here or somewhere higher here. Or you can point your direction in, say, instead of 45, I point to 30. And then when I run this, it'll end up a lot closer. So for this part, I can't give you the exact measurements because I'm not sure what letters you're using, but what you're going to do is you're going to try and experiment with the go-to location and then the direction, just so that when you end up with this, it's somewhere around your first letter, still near the left side. So type in the chat when you have it in a location you're ready, or sorry, when you're ready for the next step and you have it in a location you like. And then again, if you are having any trouble, private message me or starcoder.org assistant. So the animating makes it bigger because when we repeat 10 times, when we repeat 20 times, it's going to change my size by 5. And every time I change my size by 5, it's going to increase my size by 5. And it's also going to move because I'm saying move 10 steps. So if I don't want it to get bigger, I can just get rid of this block. But I do want it to get bigger, so I'm going to say every time I repeat 20 times in my repeat, it's going to change my size by 5. And then the final thing we're going to do for this letter is we are going to repeat 3 times. We're going to basically rotate it back to normal, or somewhere around pointing right. So for me, since I want it to point somewhere on the right, I'm going to say repeat 3 times. I'm going to turn 15 degrees, and I'm going to wait 0.1 seconds. And this is just going to make the rotation basically turn a little bit slower because I don't want it to turn really quickly. So for this, you can change the numbers. You can change it to, say, 10 degrees instead. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say at the end of this, so when I run this, so right now your program should be able to have your first letter turn, and then your second letter move and turn somewhere around the right. I'm going to say at the end, wait 0.5 seconds, and this is just because this is going to be the call for the third letter, and I'm going to broadcast third letter. So for your broadcasts, this is going to be something you need to be really careful in. Make sure you're not broadcasting second letter. You need to make sure you're broadcasting a new broadcast, because we are going to have these broadcasts for every single letter. So make sure that when you name them, you know what name they are. So if you're naming them stuff like S or C, make sure that you don't have repeating letters. And what that means is, like, the word scratch has 2 C's in it, right? So if I were to name my broadcast C, then that would mess up some of the things. So just make sure you're very clear on what your broadcast names are. And then type in the chat when you have this code in and it's working. And then, yeah, along this process, I know a lot of you guys like adding your own code. That's perfectly fine. It's really cool when you do that. Just make sure to be really careful when you do it so it doesn't mess up the program. So when you add extra code, make the program cooler. That's great. Okay, so your first 2 letters should be working. We're going to work on our third letter, which in my case is just going to be R. So we're going to go all the way to the bottom. We are going to pick our green font. So I'm going to pick the R because Scratch, hopefully I'm spelling it right, is with an R. And what we're going to do is we're going to move it to its location. And for this letter, this is going to be the letter where we're going to use sound. So make sure it is this font. Make sure it is the one with the multiple costumes. So for this font and for this sprite, what we're going to do is we're going to add a sound. And this is another part you can customize. So the automatic sound put inside letters is going to be the popping sound, which sounds like this. So what we're going to do is type in the chat if you're not ready for this, by the way. But what we're going to do is we're going to go and choose a sound. It's again going to be this bottom left corner when we go to the sound library. So with this, it's going to go to choose a sound, and then it's going to go to the library. And what we're going to do is we are going to pick a sound we like, and then pick a really fast sound. And what that means is don't pick like a full song, just pick one of the single notes. And for me, what I'm going to do is, by the way, Scratch has this really organized. We have animal effects, loops, etc. So I'm going to go to effects, and I'm going to pick the sound I like, which is going to be near the bottom. And it's going to be the whiz sound because I like that sound. So just pick a sound you like, make it decently quick. It doesn't have to be too fast as long as it can play multiple times. So you're going to click the sound, and what should happen is don't click the purple arrow. don't click, so when we go to sounds, don't click this. All you have to do is hover over it. So just click anywhere in the white space, and it'll allow you to basically import the sound in. And then you should be able to play it here. So once you guys have found the sound and you know what sound you're going to use, type in the chat. Okay, great. So with the sound, if you are still picking a sound, just hold on, and you can go back after the class and pick a better sound if you don't like the sound you have right now. But for now, just make sure you have a sound so that we can code. So we are going to start with our normal setup. We're going to say when green flag clicked, make sure that you do leave enough space for your other letters. And then I did learn that when you leave space, some of these letters are going to be really big, so do leave a good amount of space. So we're going to say when green flag clicked, we're going to go to our location, and then we're going to hide. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say when I receive, again make sure that you're really careful here. So when I receive third letter, if it's second letter, it's not going to work. So make sure you're saying when I receive third letter, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show. I'm going to do a couple things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show, because obviously I do need to show up when I'm coding. And then I'm going to have it repeat 3 times. And what it's going to do is it's going to change the costume of the sprite 3 times, because when I have these costumes, it's going to change to this one, and then this one, and then this one. But it's going to change the costume 3 times. And to do this, we're going to go into looks, and we're just going to go towards near the top, next costume. And then what we're going to say is we are going to play the sound. So you can use play sound or you can use start sound. It doesn't matter that much. But I'm going to say start sound. And then I'm going to change pitch effect by 10. And this is just because I want to make it a little bit higher. So when I click this, I do need a wait in between. So I'm going to add a wait of 0.3 seconds. So when I click this, it is going to allow me to change it from one costume to another each time with a sound. So I did forget a wait on the slides, but if you do want it to go slower or faster, just add more wait. So I can say wait 0.5 seconds if it's too fast, or wait 0.1 second if it's too slow. This is going to depend on your sound or how fast you want it to be. So when I click on this, it's just going to do that. And then at the very end, I'm going to clear sound effects. And this is just because you might have noticed when I played earlier, but the sound is going to get higher and higher. So I'm going to say clear sound effects. So type in the chat when you have this code. So when you have this code, what we're going to do is we are going to add another wait. This is going to be 0.5 seconds again. And then what we're going to do is we're going to broadcast another new broadcast. And this is just going to be called fourth letter. So your code should be working for the first 3 letters right now, but we're going to broadcast fourth letter. And what we're going to do is we are going to add our fourth letter. So I'm going to choose a sprite, and I'm going to go to the orange font again. And for me, scratch, the fourth letter is going to be A, so I'm going to click on the A, and I'm going to add it in. So by the way, for this, we are going to program 6 letters. So if you did pick a 5-letter word, I want you guys to add an exclamation point at the end or add something else at the end. But in the meantime, we're just going to code the fourth sprite. So for this, what we're going to do is we are going to actually set it up just like with our third sprite. So I'm going to pause here really quickly and then type in the chat when you have the code and then the fourth sprite so that we can start coding for the fourth sprite. So type in the chat when you're ready to code for the letter A, or the fourth letter you have. Okay, it looks great. If you guys do find that you're falling behind or anything, the code is available in my, if you search up my username in Scratch, the project should be there. So if you do need more time to look at the code, it will be there. So the other thing we're going to do is for our fourth letter, we are going to set it up pretty much exactly the same. So if you guys need the code, again, it's going to be, if you search up my name on Scratch, you should see the finished project and the code will be there. But for now, we're going to have when green flag clicked, and we're going to say when I receive fourth letter. Again, make sure that this is fourth letter. We're going to say when green flag clicked, we're going to go to our location and we're going to hide. And then I'm going to say when I receive fourth letter, I'm going to show. So type in the chat when you have that. Okay, so for this part of the project, I'm going to leave the code here. We're going to actually program with backdrops. So near the beginning of the class, I said I wanted you guys to program with, I wanted you guys to pick two backdrops that you liked. So for me, that's going to be the circles and the blue sky. But for this bit, I want you guys to choose a backdrop and then just pick two backdrops you like. And type in the chat when you've picked your two backdrops. For me, it's going to be this one and it's going to be this one. But type in the chat when your backdrop, make sure you're coding the backdrop, should have three different things. Okay, so for this bit, we are going to code inside of the backdrop area. And when we code inside of this, we are going to use the broadcast. So remember that broadcasts don't just send to one sprite, they're going to send to all of the sprites and the backdrop. So we're going to say, when I receive fourth letter, I'm going to repeat 3 times because I picked 2 backgrounds, so I have 3 backgrounds total. And I'm going to switch backdrop to next backdrops. So that's going to be when you have the switch backdrop, I'm going to click the arrow and it's going to allow me the option of changing to the next backdrop. And for this, I'm going to add a wait of 1 second, just because I want the user to look at the background, look at it, enjoy it. And then at the very bottom, what we're going to do is we are going to add a wait 0.5 seconds. And then we are going to broadcast fifth letter. So what should be happening is for our fourth sprite, it's going to receive, in our background, it's going to receive the broadcast of fourth letter. And then it's going to repeat 3 times, it's going to switch the backdrop, it's going to wait, and then broadcast. So type in the chat when you have that. Right. So what you're coding right now is going to be the stage, so make sure you've selected the backdrop. So this code is in the backdrop. Okay, so we're going to move on to the fifth letter. And for the fifth letter, it's going to go back to being this blue font. So for me, that's going to be a T. For you, again, I don't know what word you have, but pick the fifth letter. And we're just going to drag it somewhere around here. And with this, I'm going to say, when green flag clicked, I'm going to hide. And I'm going to go to X53 or I'm going to go to my current location. So if you only have 5 letters, I just realized I do have a 767 letter word. So if you do have 5 letters, what I would advise you to do is code this one. And if you do want to add other things, like if you want to add a star or you want to add another sprite, or you just want to change the letter, you can just add another sprite. So one thing you could do is you could add an exclamation point, but for now we are going to code this bit. So for our fifth letter, we're going to use colors. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to say, when I receive fifth letter, I'm going to show. And then I'm going to repeat 10 times. And I'm going to change the color effect. So again, remember the color effect is just going to change the overall color of my sprite. So I'm going to change the color effect by 25 and then wait 0.3 seconds. And then at the very end, we are going to clear graphic effects. So type in the chat when you have this code. So again, if your word is finished here, you can end here, or you can keep coding with like another sprite, like a star or a flower, but you can technically finish right here. So otherwise, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another sprite. So this is going to be, oh wait, we do need to broadcast. So we are going to broadcast sixth letter, or our next one. And then with this broadcast, we are going to create a new sprite. So if you're still using letters, you can just pick whatever letter it is. I believe this is C. So if you are still using letters, use one of these, and then otherwise you can pick another sprite. So what we're going to do for this sprite is we are going to use sound again. So we're going to say, when green flag clicked, we are going to repeat 3 times. And we are going to play another sound. So for this bit, if you had another sound that you wanted to use, or you just want to use the same sound again, pick another sound in the library. So for me, I'm just going to use a trumpet. And then click on the sound again. And what we're going to do is we are going to use this sound to code. So we have our when green flag clicked. We are going to go to our current location. And then we're going to hide. So type in the chat if you have this code. I know I'm moving a little bit fast, but if you have this code, type it in the chat. And then if you need more time, also type it in the chat. Okay, I will give another minute. So if you are finished, you can end here and you can leave if you want. But if we might go a little bit over time, so this will be in the recording for next week's video. Okay, so for the sixth letter, we are going to use our broadcast. We're going to say, when I receive sixth letter, we're going to repeat 3 times, and we're just going to play the sound. So I'm going to repeat 3 times, and I'm just going to play the sound, in my case, B trumpet. And then every time we are also going to change the volume by -10. And then we're just going to wait 0.5 seconds. So what this is going to do is we're going to repeat 3 times, we're going to play our sound, and then every time we're going to change our volume a little bit lower. And then at the very end, we are going to clear sound effects. So what this should do is when you click on this, it should basically just play the sound 3 times. And that's pretty much the code for the sixth letter. All we have to do at the end is we are going to add a wait 0.5 seconds, and then we are going to broadcast last letter. So for our last letter, type in the chat if you have this code, because we're going to end with the last letter. So we are going a little bit over time, so if you do have no letters, you can leave or you can add another sprite. The recorded video is going to be sent in the email, and it'll send the YouTube link for both the recorded video and then the faster version. So I'm going to code the last letter if you guys still have it. And then if you want, you can leave the class. So the last letter for me is going to be an H. So I'm going to pick the glow H. Nope, I'm going to pick the orange H. And then with this, just going to drag it to the end. And for this bit, I'm going to code when green flag clicked. We're going to go to the location, and then we're going to hide. Then we're going to say, when I receive last letter, I'm just going to move around left and right. So when I receive, again, make sure you don't mess up the broadcasts. When I receive last letter, I'm going to show, and then I'm just going to repeat 3 times. So for this last letter, what it's going to do is it's just going to move back and forth a couple times. So I'm going to say turn 15 degrees this way, wait 0.3 seconds, and then I'm going to turn 15 degrees back. And then I'm going to wait 0.5 seconds. So what this is going to do is it's going to basically have my letter move, move back, move back a couple times. And with this, that's pretty much all there is. So if you still have errors and stuff, I'm going to play this one more time. So if you still have errors or if you want to show your code, next week I will let you guys show your name projects if you want. Be prepared for that. And then thank you guys for staying a minute overtime. There's that. I did forget to show. So thank you guys for staying a minute overtime. But do make sure that you have your letters. If you need help or there is an error somewhere, just tell me. And then the recorded video and stuff is going to be sent in the email next week. So I will stay if you guys have questions. Thank you for staying.